This is the final word, the first test at the Gabba in Brisbane, day 2. And as we do to start this show every time, one of us has to sum up an entire day of Test cricket in the space of 30 seconds. Today, it's Adam Collins. Go.
Okay, Geoff, Australia started clean slate after bowling England out for 147, and they did lose Marcus Harris early to the most impressive Ollie Robinson, but that's when it got problematic for England. Stokes bowling Warner from a no ball. Then he was dropped just after lunch on 47 in the cordon by Rory Burns. He could have been run out on 60. He ended up making 94 in a 156 stand with Labuschagne, who was out for 74, cutting Jack Leach, who was so expensive to backward point. Enter Travis Head after a collapse of 4 for 29. Head explodes and hits the fastest, should I say, the 9th fastest Test century in Australian history. They finish at 343 for 7, I think it is. A lead of 196. England need a miracle.
They do need a miracle, slightly over the 30 seconds, but day 2 at the Gabba. That was something extraordinary in a whole range of ways. It felt like the defining story of that day for me. It became Travis Head at the end, but early it was the way that David Warner sometimes refuses to let fate actually affect him. He just says, no, I'm going to make runs, and it doesn't matter if you bowl me, it will be a no ball. It doesn't matter if I hit it in the air, you will drop it. It doesn't matter if I fall over on my face while coming down the wicket and then trying to turn back to get into my ground, you will miss the throw, Haseeb Hameed, from 2 metres away from the stumps at short leg that you could have gently underarmed. You will instead try to ping it overarm at the stumps and miss them. Like, what an extreme, pocket full of shamrocks kissed on the nose kind of day of fate David Warner had. It was vintage Warner. He's made 400s after being dropped. He nearly added after being bowled off a no ball. He nearly added a 5th 100 to that tally today. As good as got to 94, got them well into the lead, and even though there was that, sort of almost a collapse, England worked through 5 for 70 at one point. And then it was Travis Head's turn at the end. It just felt like everything that could go wrong did go wrong for England today.
Yeah, I'll start with a Haseeb throw that wasn't. I mean, I feel for him in a way. The reflex action at short leg in that situation is to ping the ball straight back at the stumps. What he didn't know is that Warner's bat came out of his hand and he could have walked over to the bails, but he wasn't to know that in that immediate moment. Talking to Chris Rogers on our commentary, he was sort of talking about days when he almost couldn't get out, and Warner was having one of those. I mean, you've already mentioned the 4 times he's gone on to race 3 figures or beyond that after getting out bowled. There was Mohammad Musa Khan when he was in the 200s and he made 335 as well, but others, Naseem Shah, Varun Aaron, Tom Curran on Boxing Day in this series 4 years ago. So he's got a habit of doing this. And look, Warner was far from fluent. He was playing leg side to Wood. He's playing resourcefully for a guy who's in his mid-30s. He's not quite the player he used to be, but he can still make the runs with the best of them. We saw that in the World T20 as recently as last month, and the partnership with Labuschagne was so devastating for England because it was scattered with opportunities. Perhaps the most profound of those was Ben Stokes castling Warner. It would have been 30 for 2. I mean, yeah, Warner was 17, but 30 for 2, that scoreboard pressure suddenly with Smith walking out, who later in the day was unconvincing. But 30 for 2 Smith walking out is very different to Smith entering when they're already ahead by 50 odd or whatever it was by the time that Labuschagne finally made way. So, well, maybe not quite 50 odd, but you know what I'm trying to say. They were well and truly in the black by that stage of the afternoon. So, and to me, it reinforced when they did get on a roll, and Robinson gets 2 in 2, picks up Warner, and then next ball has Cameron Green leaving one and getting bowled. I mean, that can happen. It was a lovely delivery, left it on length and hit the top of off stump, the stuff you dream of as a fast bowler. It's 195 for 5. Australia have lost 4 for 29. The same collapse, same collapse that Australia had, or that Australia inflicted upon England rather yesterday to start the Test match. And there's a window of opportunity, but they can't climb through it. And there's a number of reasons for that, which we'll go through our conversation, but it means that Australia were able to then put the foot down, and by the end of the day it's Joe Root bowling with Jack Leach, who was really taken to. It's Ollie Robinson injured potentially. It's Ben Stokes, who was clearly short of a gallop in his first competitive game since July, and I really can't see any way out of this for England given the next 3 days aren't meant to rain.
Yeah, well, it might rain any minute. I'm at the Gabba and a very threatening cloud is coming overhead, so we'll see if I get drenched before the end of this show. But a few things to note there. Jack Leach, 11 overs, 1 for 95, going at about 8.5 and over. Extraordinary. Mark Wood, I'll come back to how well he bowled in a second, but I need to take you to one of your pet topics, which is the front foot no ball. For the last couple of years, we've lived in a dream. We've had this beautiful world where the third umpire automatically calls a front foot no ball. Every time there is one, they buzz downstairs to the on-field umpire, say it was an overstep, and up it goes. Now, people were getting angry today because after Stokes got the wicket off the no ball, Channel 7's Trent Copeland went back and looked at the footage and found that all 4 balls in that over were no balls. None of them were called by the on-field umpire. They needed to be called by the on-field umpire because the tech that the third umpire uses to check front foot no balls isn't working in this test match. It wasn't working on day one, and so they haven't got it working after that because they had to revert to the old playing conditions that say that the standing umpire will adjudicate no balls, and that in the event of a wicket they can go upstairs to check it. The reason they don't do it every ball is because it takes longer to go to the broadcasters' cameras than it would to go to the dedicated front foot cameras that the ICC are supposed to be in charge of. So not being able to check it every ball, they only check it when the wickets happen, which means they miss the no balls leading up to the wickets, which is exactly why we had the problem in the first place. And it's just gone straight back to problem areas as soon as the technology's broken down.
Yeah, it's a reminder of how important that technology is. Paul Rifle actually called a no ball the following over, and we're like on our broadcast, hang on, what's going on here? And the reason we're saying that is, why did we not know about this? Did the ICC hope they'd get away with it for 5 days? The match officials really should acknowledge and front foot this so that people know what's going on, rather than Stokes bowling. According to there you go. According to Trent Copeland's further analysis, Stokes overstepped 14 times in 5 overs. Now, I know that people will say, just keep your bloody boot behind the line, and I get that. I understand that logic. However, at park cricket or recreational cricket, when the umpires are actually watching the front line, you get told when you're close or you know when you're overstepped. The reason why umpires don't watch the front line or don't call front foot no balls that are close is because of the Adam Voges, Richard Illingworth example in 2016. So there is rational logic to all of this, and this highlights the error of their ways to have it. They had no choice but to revert this week, but this is going to be a talking point through the test match, because we can't expect umpires in the last 18 months having not called no balls to suddenly now have to revert back to the status quo from 2020 and before that. So a bit of a watch this space there, and I suppose I just wish the ICC had told us about this and we didn't find out the way we did today, because that wasn't a good look.
Well, that was the thing, is that we had to chase that information. So there were several of us at the ground asking, pushing and asking the questions in order to get the information, even though the match referee's box is next to the press box, and you wouldn't have thought it would be that hard to, get David Boone to tell us what was going on. It took quite a while to get that info, and we had to go hunting it. They didn't tell us what was going on, even after the Stokes no ball had happened. So that was one bit that went badly for England. I mean, Rory Burns dropping a really simple catch at slip. He's got a habit of this. He put Warner down at third slip. He's done this quite a bit. I mean, talk about a miserable series. In indoor cricket sense, he's on negative runs at the moment. Hasn't been able to contribute in any way to the team. Miserable day for him. Miserable day for Jack Leach. It was just hard graft out there. The bright light for me was Mark Wood, who just bowled. He did his job. He bowled half of his deliveries during a couple of his spells were 150 plus. He was just constantly firing it in. David Warner didn't like it much. It's not like Wood was headhunting him and trying to intimidate him. It's just that Warner couldn't get bat on anything outside his off stump because it was going through too quickly. Wood ended up picking up 1 wicket, but could have had more. But I loved the way that he tried when it was really difficult for England, especially through the middle session.
Yeah, I mean, Warner was genuinely done for pace about half a dozen times, and he'd admit that. He's pretty brash kind of guy. He would know that. Again, I repeat this point about being 35 now. I mean, I'm not saying that he's on the decline steeply, but you notice little things like that. When a guy's bowling 151, it's different to what it might have been 5 years ago for Warner, and that's fine. That's just a part of maturing as a player. He'll do other things better the longer he plays the game for Australia. But Wood, I agree, exceptional, used well by Joe Root, battering ram. He did have that beamer late in the day to Travis Head, but let's put that to one side. Yeah. They made up. They kissed and made up straight away there. Ollie Robinson was superb, really. I mean, the ball he bowled to Marcus Harris, that could have found an outside edge a dozen times in his opening spell to the two left-handers. For mine, it's a reminder of why England should have bowled first, but I won't bang away about that any longer. But I mean, when you saw that collapse later in the day, when you saw Australia exposed, albeit briefly, it was just a cue to go, well, hang on, imagine if they were bowling yesterday in even more favourable conditions when the pitch was brand new, but alas, it wasn't to be. Instead, they were all out 147 yesterday and already chasing the game. And then dealing with the two bowlers that did take some tap, or three of them did, but two in particular. One, Jack Leach. We saw India do this to Jack Leach at Chennai in the first Test match earlier this year in February, principally Rishabh Pant. I think he had 85 runs taken from his first 11 overs that day, something like that. He did bite back and take 6 for the Test match, I should say, but the Australian set men in Warner and Labuschagne, by the time Leach comes on, they've put on 80 odd. He's on a hiding to nothing, and they really take him to the cleaners between, I suppose, it was an extended final session. So that period often can be in an extended session, the last half an hour, when you concede a lot of runs, and so it was for Leach in his 3 overs before the interval, going for 35, I think it was. And Ben Stokes, who conceded 50 odd from his 9 overs, and again, he hasn't played a competitive game since July. He bowled so nicely to start, but then had that niggle, and I suppose if you've got a small niggle, and we're not entirely sure what this niggle is, by the way, but a small niggle without a lot of match practice and not much to go on the tour so far, that can become a big niggle. So that'll be a bit of a watch this space. And perhaps worse again is the fact that Ollie Robinson went off the ground after bowling 1 over late. He was done for the day. So a bit of a watch this space in terms of England's bowling lineup. The fact they've got Broad and Anderson, who would have been shaking their heads today, I suppose, given the fact they've both been left out of this team and rested for next week. Well, I mean, the way things are going, they'll be back in the team next week after Australia are going to record a thumping victory at the Gabba, and they'll already be on the back foot chasing the series as well. So I think England have overthought this a little bit.
A note on Marcus Harris from the ABC statistician Rick Finlay. He said there are 233 players who've had at least 20 innings as a Test opener. Out of those players, Marcus Harris on batting averages is 233rd on the list. He has the worst ever average from someone to open 20 times. So he needs something to change pretty quickly. Travis Head, look, it wasn't convincing at any stage. He basically played a shot at every ball, but England gave him balls to play shots at. They gave him wide balls and short balls, and he just went for them. He threw everything at them. There were lots of edgy ones, lots of ones over the cordon, lots of aerial stuff over the onside, but 112 not out from 95. It doesn't matter how he got there. He's ensured that Australia are almost 200 in front, and surely will can't go on to lose from here, you would think.
No, if you're watching this on YouTube, you'll have seen me grimace when you said he didn't look convincing at any stage. I thought he looked super convincing from about 25 onwards. His first 15 balls, sure, absolutely. He could have edged almost any of those balls, to be honest with you, and it felt like it could have been a brief stay in the middle. But he managed to keep scoring, and then from about 30 to about 90, he was exceptional. The way he was striking the ball, I was on air for much of that. A couple of those square drives were immaculate, and again, using Chris Rogers as a reference point, being a fellow left-handed batsman, his perspective is that you need to accept that Travis Head will go through lean periods, but you need to also realise that he's a match winner. When he's on, he's an exceptionally gifted player, and recording a century in 85 balls, yes, England were having a day in the dirt, but you've still got to achieve that, and he really did step it up. You could see the emotion in his face and in his eyes, especially when racing 3 figures. He obviously won the final spot in this team over the more experienced Usman Khawaja. He probably needed to make runs in that final Shield game for South Australia against Queensland. He got a brisk century that day when South Australia were following on to consolidate his spot. And talking to Bharat Sundaresan about it, who watches Travis Head net over and over again, he has noticed a far more positive disposition from him this year. So it's almost as though he's surrendered to his game. He's trying not to be what people maybe want a Test number 5 to be, with lots of footwork. Instead, he's leaning into his disposition to cut the ball with such aggression. His square drives I've already mentioned, and when it comes off on days like today, he's a massive asset for this side. And look, he will now give himself all 5 tests in this series. There's no way he'll be replaced between now and the end of January, which means it's up to him really now. This was his 3rd century in Test cricket, but they're not going to drop him at this point now, given what he's been able to do do in terms of psychological damage to this England bowling lineup. They won't forget this afternoon and what Travis Head was able to achieve. So it's up to Travis Head what comes next, but I think this will be an important building block in what could now go on to be a long Australian career.
The Final Word Hall of Fame and our player of the day, they're brought to you by ZOLEO. Right now, this is the satellite communications magic technology, the magic box that makes your smartphone into a satellite phone. It means you can send a text or an email from anywhere in the world to anywhere in the world. And we're setting up a competition that means you will be able to win one of these and a year's subscription to be able to text people from the North Pole. If you want, you can go there and text people with this ZOLEO, ZOLEO.com, if you want to go and have a look at them. If you want to go and have a look at them in the meantime. The Final Word Hall of Fame is where we pick the most final word moment of the day. Adam, for me, we talked about the near run out from short leg. It was the fact that when Warner lost his bat, he rolled over onto his stomach and then he tried to swim freestyle back down the pitch to get back into his ground with one glove. Now, I've only seen two players swim on a cricket pitch. Geoff Archer did it after the World Cup final in 2019. When everyone else ran to Joss Buttler, he just ran off on his own and then lay on the ground and started swimming for some reason. It was beautiful. You know, this one lone figure in a deep green sea. And then Warner today was just, like he was hammering for the line in the closing 10 metres of the 100 at the Olympics. He was thrashing his arms and legs trying to get back. He still wouldn't have got there had Haseeb just underarmed gently at the stumps. But it was beautiful to watch. That was my Hall of Fame.
Yeah, mine is going to be the anti-Hall of Fame. I'm sorry to do this, but England 14 overs short of their allotment. I'm not going to bang on about it. We've done an entire show on this about 6 months ago, but you know what? They'll probably get the standard slap on the wrist and away they go. But 14 overs short, not good enough. What do you do to fix it? Well, we've gone through that already. There are a number of price signals that they can send out to make sure that teams get through their overs, but again, not good enough. Frustrating for all involved, and there'll be no mechanism to make up their overs because that's the way it goes. We've just burnt those overs in this test match, and yes, we're a long way advanced and it probably won't affect the final result here, but there's something awry here and it's getting worse year on year.
Player of the day, maybe it's Marnus Labuschagne, because we haven't even talked about him, because he made 74 so calmly that it let Warner be ropey and weird and give chances and all the rest of it at the other end, because Marnus was just calmly assembling runs, played a few lovely shots to the boundary, driving away square of the wicket on the offside. But no muss, no fuss, another big half century, didn't go on to that huge score, but has started his series off on the right foot.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Labuschagne, until he got out, he was peerless. And we've seen how much he loves the Gabba. At one stage today, he was averaging in excess of 100 at test level on that ground. He's going to end up with an astonishing test record. He's just getting better and better. And yeah, when he got out, it was so against the grain. I couldn't believe it. I was on commentary at the time. I'm like, how's that happened? The ball after launching Jack Leach for six back over his head, he just got one that bounced a bit more, but it didn't detract at all from the contribution nor the partnership with Warner. Those two love batting together. They love batting together at the Gabba, which they did so wonderfully 2 years ago against Pakistan. So yes, despite the fact that Head was the highest scorer, and he'll continue tomorrow, who knows what he might achieve. I agree. I think Labuschagne was the most important player on the day.
It is hot, steamy, humid at the Gabba. It's about to tip rain on my head. It's windy. I've had to tie my hair back with my accreditation. My camera's about to fall over. It's going to be apocalyptic, and it might be so for England tomorrow as well. But we will be back on this show on day 3, because we're here every day for the Ashes. The Final Word Daily. Geoff Lemon and Adam Collins. We'll see you next time.
Good night.